In 2005, a humpback whale was found floating off the coast of San Francisco. She was tangled in over 20 crab pot lines. The ropes were wrapped around her mouth, her pectoral fins, her tail. One line was cutting so deeply into her flesh that rescuers said if they had arrived an hour later, she would have been dead. 4 divers went into the water. The whale was 50 feet long. She weighed 50 tons. A single movement from her could have killed any one of them instantly. She didn't move. For over an hour, she held almost completely still while the divers cut through each line with handheld knives. When the last rope was gone, she didn't swim away immediately. She circled back. She approached each diver individually. She nudged them. The diver who later described it said it felt like she was thanking them. He said he'd never experienced anything like it in his life. And here is the question that moment leaves behind. Did she know? Not just that the ropes were gone. Did she know, in any meaningful sense, that the humans in the water had chosen to help her? Your first instinct is probably to say no. She's a whale. She doesn't understand human intention. She responded to stimulus. The pain stopped. She associated the divers with the pain stopping. That's it. That's the whole story. Except the science says the story is more complicated than that. And the part that gets complicated is the part nobody expected. Start with what a wild animal's threat system actually does. Every prey animal on the planet runs the same basic program. Moving object detected. Calculate size, speed, and trajectory. Cross-reference with known threat profiles. Assign threat level. Respond. This system is extraordinarily fast. A gazelle doesn't think about whether the lion looks hungry. It reads body posture, direction of gaze, speed of approach, and it's already running before the conscious brain has processed anything. The threat detection system evolved to be faster than thought because thinking takes time, and time gets you killed. Humans trigger that system by default. We are large, upright, forward-facing predators. Our eyes face forward, which is the universal anatomical signature of a hunter. Prey animals read forward-facing eyes as a threat signal before they process anything else about you. This is why zoo animals will maintain eye contact with visitors at a distance and bolt the moment you step closer. You didn't change. The distance changed. The threat calculation flipped, which makes what happened with that whale and what happens in dozens of documented cases every year genuinely strange, because something in these animals overrides the default program. And the question is what? In 2016, researchers at the University of Exeter published a study on ravens. Ravens are not domesticated. They are wild birds with no evolutionary history of dependency on humans. The researchers wanted to know whether ravens could read human gaze direction and use it as information. The answer was yes, unambiguously. Ravens not only tracked where a human was looking, they actively used that information to decide whether to approach food, whether to hide cached food from a human observer, and whether a human's attention was focused on them specifically. They weren't just reacting to presence, they were reading attention. They were modeling in some functional sense what the human was focused on and what that meant for them. This capacity, the ability to read where another individual's attention is directed and infer something about their mental state from it, is called gaze following. It is one of the foundational building blocks of what psychologists call theory of mind, the ability to attribute mental states to others, to understand that another being has intentions, beliefs, and goals that are separate from your own. Human children develop robust gaze following around 9 to 12 months. For decades, scientists assumed this was uniquely human, or at best shared with our closest primate relatives. The Raven study was one of a growing body of research dismantling that assumption entirely. Elephants can distinguish between human languages and use the difference to calibrate their threat response. A study published in 2014 by researchers at the University of Sussex played recordings of Maasai men who traditionally hunt elephants and Kamba men who do not. The elephants responded to Maasai voices with defensive bunching and increased vigilance. They responded to Kamba voices with far less alarm. They were not just hearing human sounds and responding to human sounds. They were categorizing humans by cultural identity and assigning different threat levels to different groups. They had a model of human social variation inside their heads. Dolphins have been documented approaching fishing boats in distress, circling injured swimmers, and in multiple recorded cases, positioning themselves between swimmers and sharks in a way that can only be described as deliberate shielding. Marine biologists are careful with language around these events. They note that dolphins are highly social animals with complex group protection behaviors, and that some of what looks like intentional protection of humans may be an extension of those same social instincts activated by proximity. But careful language is not the same as a definitive no. What the researchers consistently say is that the behavior is real. The interpretation is what remains open. And then there are the cases that are hardest to explain away. A gorilla named Binti Jua at the Brookfield Zoo in Chicago. In 1996, a 3-year-old boy fell 18 feet into the gorilla enclosure and lay unconscious on the ground. Binti Jua, a female western lowland gorilla with her own infant on her back, walked to the boy, cradled him gently, carried him to the enclosure door where keepers could reach him, and sat waiting. The zoo had trained her in infant care as part of a program to help gorillas raised in captivity become better mothers. Some researchers pointed to that training as the explanation. cognition. Others noted that the training was for caring for gorilla infants, not unconscious human children, and that no training protocol tells a gorilla to carry an injured being to the door and wait. What unites all of these cases is not sentimentality. It is something more specific. In each of them, the animal made a choice that ran counter to its default threat response. The whale held still when everything in its biology said move or die. The raven approached when everything in its threat system said the observer is watching you. The gorilla moved toward the vulnerable object instead of away from it. Something overrode the default. And the question of what that something is has been driving a quiet revolution in animal cognition research for the last 20 years. The current leading framework is not a simple one. It does not say animals have empathy the way humans do. It says something more careful and more interesting. It says that several species have developed what researchers call functional analogs to empathy. Neural and behavioral systems that produce outputs similar to what empathy produces in humans, built from different evolutionary pressures, operating through different mechanisms, but arriving at similar results. The capacity to read distress in another individual, the capacity to be moved by it, the capacity to act in response to it in ways that benefit the distressed individual at a cost to yourself. And here is where the evolutionary history becomes relevant. Humans and the animals most consistently documented in these cases, elephants, cetaceans, corvids, great apes, have something in common beyond intelligence. They have all spent thousands to tens of thousands of years in proximity to human beings. Not always in cooperation, not always peacefully, but in contact. Elephants in Africa have lived alongside human communities for so long that researchers believe they have developed a specific and detailed cognitive model of human behavior that has no equivalent in their models of any other species. They know us in a way they do not know lions. We have been the most consequential thing in their environment for longer than any of them can individually remember. Some researchers have begun to suggest that this long overlap has produced something real in these animals. Not domestication, not dependency. Something more like a working model of human intention. A capacity built over generations to read whether a specific human in a specific moment is approaching with a weapon or without one, whether the body posture signals threat or not, whether the gaze is predatory or something else. The whale off San Francisco had never been near a human diver before. Her species had been hunted by humans for centuries. Every piece of ancestral information she carried said humans meant death, and she held still anyway for over an hour while they cut her free. The diver who said it felt like she was thanking them was almost certainly wrong about the word. Gratitude as humans experience it is a complex social emotion built on a specific kind of self-awareness and social accounting that we cannot confirm in any cetacean. But he was not wrong about the feeling. Something passed between them in that water. Something that moved him enough that he was still talking about it years later in interviews, and wrote about it in ways that suggested it had changed something in how he understood the world. What that something was is the question science is still working toward. What we know now is that it was not nothing. These animals are reading us. They have been reading us for a very long time. And in certain moments, under certain conditions, what they read in us is apparently enough to make them choose differently than everything in their biology would otherwise tell them to. The gap we assumed was there may be smaller than we thought. And what sits in that gap, whatever it is one of the more quietly astonishing things about being alive on this planet at the same time as these animals. If you found this video interesting, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this.